Well, the Melbourne Cup's obviously one of the highlights, but another is the Cox Plate. This time around we do have a 3-year-old. We had one last year as well, which a lot of people fancied. I think you didn't mind the look of Helmet. Piero is probably just at another level. Are you willing to follow a 3-year-old into the Cox Plate this year?
Well, you know, Helmet, we backed Helmet 8 or 9 to 1 to win the Cox Plate and started at 6 to 4, and started 6 to 4 on merit, but you know, ran too fast and you know faded and.
Is that style of horse an erratic horse though?
Well,
it's tough to follow.
Yeah, it followed a long history of horses who win the Caulfield Guineas who just get beaten in the Cox Plate. It's you know, I imagine it's Gay's intention from the Moonee Valley Stud Stakes to go into the Caulfield Guineas. Caulfield Guineas winners in the last 30 years got an atrocious record in the Cox Plate. So I'm going to I'd be keeping dry my powder until it gets a bit closer. More Joyous, we backed More Joyous a couple of years ago when she, floundered running 5th or 6th. She wasn't quite as mature. If she ran to her Queen Elizabeth Stakes rating in the Cox Plate, it'd take a very good Piero to beat her. I'd be surprised she'd get beaten if she runs up to that form.
So, if we're having a bet at the moment on the Cox Plate, we're looking more to More Joyous, you think?
Well, they're the two favourites, and you know it's the way for age form. I must admit, the way for age form outside them is thin. We saw Happy Trails win on Saturday in the. I wouldn't take 50 to 1 Happy Trails to win a Cox Plate. He just beat Green Moon, Rekindle Interest. Green Moon would be 15, 20 to 1 chance best, I think, in the Cox Plate. I think Rekindled Interest similarly. They're the ones running around. Then you've got Southern Speed. Well, you know, she'd be, in my opinion, 33 to 1 chance to win a Cox Plate. Where do you go from there? Manigar, you know, he's smart weight for age horse, right? But you know, we haven't got the depth in the weight for age scene. So it does look like Piero or More Joyous, you know, if could step up to the plate.
Manigar has obviously been one of the recent stars of Australian racing. Hasn't got a great deal of a mention here. Do you think that Manigar continues on that path throughout this spring?
Yes, well, I think I've liked Manigar all along. I've respected him all along. He's been winning in the competition he's in. You know, it's as I say, you know, there's no superstar weight for age horse around. And he's been Johnny, you know, on the block at the right time, in my opinion. So I'd be surprised if a Manigar could win the Cox Plate unless it's a lower edition. Having said that, you know, Cox Plate can rate down. There is a, you know, Pinker won it, to be honest. So, you know, it's not always a big rating race.
The Cox Plate, is it a more difficult, well, they're all very, very difficult, but would you recommend punters stay away perhaps early on from a Cox Plate compared to the Cups?
I haven't got a horse for the race yet. I'm pretty keen on the Epsom. I knew that Fat Al would get in on the bottom weight, Ambidexter similarly. Whether Ambidexter goes down to Melbourne or not, I'm not sure. Whether they're a certainty to run in the race, I'm not certain. But the race rated extremely high the other day. The Shannon Quality, I think that's what it's called, or maybe not. Theo Marks. It was a very high rating race, and I think that one of those horses, or both of them, will win a Group 1 mile in the next month and a half.
Well, punters, unlike perhaps yourself, don't have a profession within racing and don't have the luxury of being able to spend so much time and get the replays and look at all the races from around the world and put them all together and come up with their winners. But what would your advice be to people who do want to have an early bet in the spring? What are the key points and the goals they should be going for to pick out winners in spring racing?
Well, I think the form cycle of the horses is very, very important. I think if you want to have a bet on a horse in a feature race, look at his previous form. What run from a spell did he peak? What run from a spell did he win a feature race or run a great race? And anticipate whether that's going to likely be the same run at the same distance that you're targeting a ticket on. I've done that with Green Moon in the Melbourne Cup and the Caulfield Cup, and that's how I usually try and focus my attention for picking a winner in advance.
We've mentioned Green Moon quite a lot of times. It seems to be that that's maybe the horse of the spring for you. If you're a punter, just trying to have a bet on Green Moon at the moment, what are you trying to do? You're obviously betting in a Melbourne Cup, but with other things up in the air, those variables, do you just stay away and wait?
Well, I'm live with him and in the double and both legs, so I've got a vested interest. But if you asked me today and listening to the media reports coming out of the stable, you'd focus on the Melbourne Cup. He's got a couple of really good assets. Another one of his assets is that he had an abbreviated autumn campaign of just one run. That's a very good pattern, and I think whether he starts shorter than his $13 or $14 that he is at the moment is going to be all dependent upon his lead-up run. And I think that his lead-up run in the Caulfield Cup is where he's likely to produce a peak, which is the Mackay pattern, which is the 15 out of 21 winners pattern. Whether he can produce a peak in the Cox Plate, which I want him to do, would be arguable. But focusing on Green Moon, you'd have a ticket on the Melbourne Cup.
What's your success rate been like in the Melbourne Cup? It is the hardest race there is. You've been very successful in all racing. What about the Melbourne Cup in particular? You obviously go well, but how well?
I was lucky Mackay came along, right? So I was on her. Although in one of her wins, I marked her second because I fell into a Sydney sider, I think. But I like the Melbourne Cup. It's a very good race, and there are a number of rules that you can get the field down to, 4 to 6 every year, and most years that's the winner comes out of those rules.
With those rules, will you be rolling a line through Mount Athos?
He's going to qualify on 2 of my major rules, so the fact that every duck doesn't line up is not going to disqualify him for me this year. The big rule he's going to qualify on is a peak performance his last start. The other rule he's going to qualify on is that his relative collateral rating that I've produced compared to what the handicappers marked him on, there's a fairly large difference. So I think he's weighted to win.
All right, well, Dominic, thanks so much for joining us. Just before we finish up, we're having a bet in the Melbourne Cup today. What are we having?
I know it sounds thin, but they're both going to be $13, $14. I think one of them, Green Moon or Mount Athos, will start under $7, and there's a good chance that if you're backing them both and you're taking $7 collectively about them, you're going to have a pretty good ticket.
All right, well, thanks so much for joining us, and good luck in the spring.
Thank you.